Yes. All right. Here we are. Another step in our journey in the Gospel of Mark with Jesus to the cross. Again, I really enjoyed doing this, not only because of our friendship and how we know each other so well and how we share in this love of the gospel. It's always been fun. But I think really we're offering something really powerful to people if they dare to listen, because I think
Hmm.
what we're talking about is good and what we're talking about is relevant. So today we're going to be moving into a little deeper into the story of Jesus going to the cross with a lot of great stories, and I'll just turn this over to you, Pastor Goodson, and let you orientate everyone to what's going on in the Gospel of Mark.
Okay. Welcome to week 4 of our podcast. Today happens to be St. Patrick's Day, so I made sure to wear my green so I don't get pinched
I got green.
by anybody whom anybody I come in contact with. So let us begin. Let us dive again into the Gospel of Mark, where we are with Jesus and his disciples as they march to Jerusalem and march to the cross. First, a little reminder of where we've been. We are on the precipice of what is often called the Passion narrative. Passion narrative begins, I guess you could say, when Jesus enters Jerusalem. Remember Palm Sunday and the palms and everything. Hosanna to the Son of David. And that's chapter 11. So, chapter 11 through chapter 16 of the Gospel of Mark would constitute what we call the Passion narrative, the Passion of Jesus. And that takes up between 30 and 40% of the Gospel, which means Mark, everything really in Mark now leads up to this. And so it's mighty important. But what we have been dealing with right now is when Jesus started this journey, and that was Mark 8:27. Who do people say that I am? Peter jumps up and says, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus said, "Be quiet about that." And then Jesus 3 times will say what's going to happen in Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be handed over, right? And he does that 3 times. And after each prediction of what's going to happen in Jerusalem, the disciples somehow don't get it. Peter rebukes Jesus. The disciples argue on the way after the second prediction, who's greatest? And then after the third prediction, John and James ask for seats of honor when Jesus comes into his kingdom. And after each Jesus teaches them what it means to be a disciple. And after that third prediction brings us to a kind of what I think is a transition story, the story of blind Bartimaeus. Before we get into that, let me touch on a couple things. First thing, what is called in Mark by a lot of scholars the Messianic secret. And basically that is that though Mark starts off with that, this is the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, throughout those first 8 chapters, it seems that Jesus kind of steps away from that. He, the the evil spirits proclaim him to be the Son of God, and he tells them to quiet down. Whenever he does a miracle, he says, "Well, don't tell anyone." Uh, what title he does embrace is not really Messiah, Christ. It's the Son of Man. In each of the 3 predictions, he says the Son of Man will be handed over, and it's an interesting title for the Messiah. You see it in parts of the Old Testament. Particular Daniel talks about the Son of Man coming in the clouds at the end of the ages. So Jesus, I think, picks that for a particular reason, which, with all the study I've done of Mark, I really don't understand. But he uses it. Okay, now let's talk about the disciples and their constant misunderstanding of who Jesus is, because that's important. In the lead up to 8:27, uh, the disciples and Jesus are in a boat, and they have only one loaf. He said, "Where are we going to get some more stuff to eat?" And Jesus says, "Watch out. Beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and the yeast of Herod." And the disciples say, "Is that because we have no bread?" And what follows is uh, Jesus says, "Why are you talking about bread? Don't you get it? Don't you get what I'm talking about?" And in verse 21, he finally says, "Do you not yet understand?" Um, Curiously, the next story is Jesus curing a blind man. So it's like the disciples need to have their eyes open so they can see what Jesus is talking about. And then, of course, we get into this section where Jesus predicts his passion. He talks about the discipleship, and the disciples just don't get it. They don't seem to understand. So, immediately following that third prediction of the Passion, Dave, and viewers, we get to what I would think is kind of a transition story. There's one more story at the end of chapter 10. It's a miracle, and it leads directly into the triumphal entry. So Jesus is going through Jericho, right? And on his way out of Jericho, he's heading to Jerusalem. Now, what are the disciples thinking? Now, if we recall in the triumphal entry, he comes in riding on a donkey, and people are waving palm branches and proclaiming that blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. It's often called, Dave and reviewers, the triumphal entry. The Messiah is coming. Before that happens, we get this story about blind Bartimaeus. So let's go ahead and take a close look at that story. I think it's kind of interesting. Right after James and John asked for seats of honor, they came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large cloud were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, interesting, Bartimaeus means, in fact, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout, "John, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." You know, just the kind of thing that disciples need to be about, isn't it? What has Jesus been saying? He came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. But they're hurrying along. They're on their way to Jerusalem. Jesus is going to be crowned king. We don't have time for this stuff. So many sternly ordered him to be quiet. Now, it doesn't say whether the disciples were amongst those, but, I don't see them rising up to lend a hand, do you? But he cried out even louder. And then Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And then they called to the blind man, and this just seems so sarcastic. "Take care, he's calling you." Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said, "My teacher, let me see again." And Jesus says, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. Now, my thinking is, what is wrong with the disciples? Here is a perfect example of serving, of stopping and taking care of somebody in distress. "Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me." "Shut up," they told him. And my thinking is, and this isn't in the text, but you know what? We're getting on our way to Jerusalem, and Jesus is going to enter, and there's going to be proclaimed the Christ, and everything will be great. So, we don't have time. We don't have time for you. So I think as we're going into Jerusalem, This is kind of it's not a final test of discipleship, but it's a example, I think, that the disciples just haven't caught on. So now, and that transitions us into what's going to happen in Jerusalem and to the cross. And we should remember that. Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started off is the whole messianic secret, the inability of the disciples to really capture or understand, like you were saying about God and about what the plan is. And my thinking was, well, first of all, what else is new? Because you think about today, we still don't get it. And I don't know how many times, especially in our preaching, we kind of lay it all out there and it just poof, it just flies, the message just kind of flies off. And you wonder as a pastor, is the sermon really coming alive in people's lives? Because we never get to see it, right? We never get to see
Yeah. You
it.
hope.
And really it's what Jesus says, let them who have ears hear, and it's always the work of the Holy Spirit. It's not up to us uh, to understand it because or see results, because it's the Holy Spirit, God working people's lives at the right time, the right place. And so, in a way, that's what I'm saying. The struggle of the disciples is something we can really identify with, because who really understands how that. Plus, the other thing, it's a good thing they misunderstood it because Jesus is, I mean, the whole messianic secret, and Jesus constantly said, don't tell anybody. It's just kind of like because if you tell somebody, they're going to misunderstand it. They're going to make, like you were just saying, they're going to make this into some kind of parade into Jerusalem to take over and kick the Romans out. And we're
Hmm.
going to establish this great and wonderful, kingdom. Uh, but that's not what this is about. It's like you were saying, it's more about redemption and saving and
Hmm.
service and the power of compassion and love is God bearing the sins of the world. That's what the cross is, and we're going to
I
get more into that as we
yeah,
get into next week. But
yeah.
I
I
like
think
how
we
you use one more point, then, but I really like how you use blind Bartimaeus, and that story sits right, like you were saying, in the transition part of Mark, because ultimately Jesus is dealing not with just the physical blindness of this man, but the blindness of the disciples that are so assumed, they're so into, hey, we're marching to glory here, that they forget that Jesus came for mercy.
yeah.
I love that phrase. And the blind man Bartimaeus keeps crying out, Son of David, have mercy on me.
Hmm.
Mercy. And it's really, the whole, it kind of sets, like you were saying, it sets up the whole narrative, the whole story, as we go with Jesus to the cross, is kind of like, hey, I'm dealing with not just physical blindness, but the blindness of the world to mercy and
Hmm.
kindness and service and love and the redemptive power of love and
Hmm.
service to others. So he heals blind Bartimaeus, who follows him. And I love it. I'm finishing with this. I love how Jesus says a really nice Lutheran thing. Your faith has made you well.
Hmm.
That ultimately we don't
Yeah.
understand. We can't comprehend this. Our faith in kindness, mercy, power of the cross that makes us well, that puts us back together, that gets us into a place of peace and hope and joy.
Hmm.
I think that's a great story, if you will. Hey, you understand the cross? let me tell you the story of Blind Bartimaeus, and maybe you'll get it.
Hmm.
Turn it right back to you.
I think this Mark and his message to us, I think, resonate in our country today, where it seems there's a triumphal theology that's kind of based around this kind of Christian nationalism that seems to be taking over a lot amongst some faithful Christians, where you know it's discipleship of power, a discipleship of winning, a discipleship of strength. Heard it said that there's some folks who can't understand a Jesus who talks about servanthood or who talks about turning the other cheek or loving your neighbor. And I've heard it that it's been said, well, that's kind of weak, isn't it? But that's, I think, Mark is talking about that. Certainly, Paul, the cross is still, as Paul said, an embarrassment. I don't know that he said that exactly, but it is an embarrassment. Um, we are so much about winning and about topping our neighbor and being better uh, than folks, and that triumphalism is dangerous. I think to the Christian faith. It's exactly, the blindness of the disciples is maybe something that's all around us, and it masks the message that Jesus wants to give. And I said, discipleship happens in between our good works. Those things that we do that we want to. This is hard to do. Pat ourselves on the back, and then we miss those little things. You know, miss those things where we could have reached out, uh, or forget to say a kind word to the cashier that's opposite us. Instead, we get angry because they messed up and didn't give us the price that we should have gotten. And people get in our way when we're driving on the car, and fickle finger of fate. The discipleship is we think, well, we do a few good works, we're done.
It's
The way of life.
the blindness to God's mercy as we're dealing with the cashier who didn't quite get it right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, where's God's mercy in all this?
Mm-hmm.
How do we see God's mercy?
And
And
it's
also merciful to, someone's cheating, the
yeah,
cashier's cheating. We
yeah,
merciful to those who she's cheating.
yeah.
Or he, I must be gender, not gender.
Well, it's
So,
a it's a
it's a mercy. And what's one of the part that I'll turn back to you is that when you were talking, I kept thinking how Martin Luther, uh, you know how I love Luther,
mhm,
talked about theology of the cross versus theology of glory. And what you were talking about, and especially about the theology of glory, Jesus is saying no to the theology of glory, and he's saying
mhm,
yes to the theology of the cross. And
yeah,
that's very powerful way of understanding this whole thing, that we're seeking the theology of the cross as we go with Jesus to the
yeah.
cross in Mark, right?
That's right. So we Jesus goes to Jerusalem. You know the story. Triumphal entry. Jesus cleanses the temple. Um, there's Jesus does some teachings, especially the Pharisees and the scribes, the religious leaders that Jesus has been confronting and besting in all the debates, uh, continues to do so. You get the Last Supper, Gethsemane, the betrayal, um, and then there's a line in there that I think is so important when one is confronted with the scandal of the cross and the scandal of a Messiah who's not going to be reign triumphant, but is going to the cross. Gospel of Mark, I think it's the only one who includes this phrase: "They forsook him and fled." And Peter, well, he didn't flee; he kind of crept in a little bit behind. But do you remember what happened? He denied Jesus, even knowing him. Um, what discipleship is hard. because we're following not a triumphant Christ, but a Christ that went to the cross. Yes, Easter, yes, but I noticed as growing up, Dave, that there's always a big crowd at Palm Sunday, triumphal entry. We get the boat and everybody, the Holy Week services, particularly Good Friday, a little thin.
Mhm.
Then you get a big crowd at Easter. What do they call it? Easter Christians. They come only once a year. So sometimes we only know the triumphant Jesus, but we don't know the pain and the degradation, which is the cross, which is also a part of life.
Yeah, it's the mercy of God.
So, uh,
Being a merciful. I mean, it's kind of interesting, like you said about Peter. Peter has, in the end, doesn't seem to have faith, though in the end he
mhm,
does. But Bartimaeus had faith
mhm,
because he could see. His faith made him well.
yeah,
Peter did not have a faith yet that would make him well, and he was still blind.
he had enough faith that he moved a little closer anyway
Yeah, yeah.
before confront. And
Eventually,
it's a
we all
test.
get it in the end,
Yeah, it's a test that we
Um,
all, like Peter, sometimes we do well, sometimes we don't.
having our eyes
And
open to the mercies of God is not an
yeah,
easy thing.
no. So that puts us ready to follow Jesus to the cross and then to Easter and see what happens there.
Yeah, our last podcast will be next week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right.
So for this
Thank y'all for
St.
everybody
Patrick's Day,
listening. If you
happy
think about
St.
yeah,
Patrick's
and if
Day
you
to all
think
of you.
if you've listened to the podcast, please be sure to like it, subscribe to it, and
Yeah,
so forth. Share it because it's a way of doing evangelism. It's a way of
yeah.
sharing the gospel, and more likes, more shares we get, the more YouTube will promote it. It's all
Hmm.
based on how popular your
Clicks.
podcast is.
Yeah, clicks and
So it's always an
thumbs up.
important way of sharing the gospel. All
Yep.
right. All right. We'll see you.
Blessings to all of you
See you
this
on
week.
Sunday or see you at the prayer
Yeah,
services we offer.
yeah.
You can hear Pastor Goodson twice a week,
What
every
a deal.
week. All right.
Watch out.
God bless.
God bless.